Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Museum's Walter and Leon Annenberg Theater. My name is Al Curley. I'm a member of the First Amendment Society Council, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this special members event. As members of the museum, you are advocates of the First Amendment. My wife and I became Press Pass members in 2012, and we soon increased our membership to the Friends of the First Amendment Society, and lately we've been working on the council. I spent nearly 40 years in the U.S. Foreign Service, and I served in many countries that do not recognize the basic freedoms of the First Amendment. And I came to understand that my financial and personal support of these freedoms is essential to me as a responsible citizen of this great country. Because when you start traveling, you realize that this is the greatest country in the world. Thank you. And I thank you for all your support of this institution, and I encourage you to continue partnering with the museum as Press Pass, Friends Society, and corporate members. It is because of you and your support that we are able to host programs with historic figures like tonight's real-life civil rights superhero. I also want to thank the museum's corporate members, Walmart and Altria. As sponsors of the Civil Rights at 50 exhibit series, they have done much to help the museum educate and engage visitors, students, and lifelong learners who care deeply about the civil rights movement and its legacy. Of course, nobody knows more about the civil rights movement and the vital role the First Amendment played in it than Congressman John Lewis, who has represented Georgia's 5th congressional district since 1987. A true American icon and pioneer, Lewis became a leader of the student sit-in at age 20, was one of the original Freedom Riders, and he led the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee during the height of its influence. He spoke at the March on Washington and led the Bloody Sunday March in Selma, Alabama. That's just part of that legacy. The Congressman's story is documented in detail in the museum's civil rights exhibit, Make Some Noise. And the title of the exhibit comes from the very words of Congressman Lewis, who once said, "You gotta get out there and push and organize and stand up and make some noise." We all know of the Congressman's long and distinguished career, and now we can add a new line to his resume, graphic novelist. The Congressman is co-author of his latest graphic novel, March, Book 2, which provides a vivid first-hand account of John Lewis's lifelong struggle for civil and human rights. We look forward to hearing from the Congressman about the new book, which is available in the museum's atrium, and also the representative will be on hand to sign the book for you. The Congressman co-wrote the book with Andrew Aydin, who serves as digital director and policy advisor to the Congressman. We'll also be hearing from Andrew later tonight. Before I introduce the Congressman and Andrew, please enjoy this brief video produced by the museum, which previews the new book.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
I have the pleasure to present to this great audience Brother John Lewis.
My friends, let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution. Those who have said be patient and wait, we must say that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now.
Fires of frustration and discord are burning in every city, north and south, where legal remedies are not at hand.
I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Ain't gonna let nobody load it. Turn me round,
are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again.
Marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse Lord him. Turn me round, turn me round.
They knocked one man, a white man, down at my feet, and they beat him and kicked him until his face was a bloody red pulp.
Redress is sought in the streets, in demonstrations, parades, and protests. We face, therefore, a moral crisis as a country and a people.
I appeal to all of you to get in this great revolution that is sweeping this nation. We must say, wake up, America, wake up. For we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
Now it is my honor to introduce Congressman John Lewis and Andrew Aydin.
Thank you. Thank you, Doc. Good evening. Thank you for those kind words of introduction. I must say that I'm delighted, very happy, and very pleased to be here tonight, one more time in the museum. Happy to be here with my co-author, my friend, and my brother, Andrew Aydin. It was his idea that we should write this book, book 1 and book 2, graphic novel, March. And you will hear from Andrew. Some of you have heard me say from time to time that I didn't grow up in a big city like Washington, D.C., or New York, or Buffalo, or Chicago, or Detroit, or Atlanta, or Montgomery, or Birmingham. I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. And we tell the story of my early life in book 1. Growing up on a farm, raising chickens, preaching to chickens. And as a little boy, it was my responsibility to care for those chickens. And I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chicken. I know some of you here know something about raising chicken. If you don't, I know some of you love to maybe eat a piece of chicken every so often. You may like Bojangles, Kentucky Fried, maybe Church's, or maybe Chick-fil-A. But growing up there in rural Alabama during the 40s and the 50s, when I would visit the little town of Troy, or visit Montgomery, or Birmingham, or Tuskegee, I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. And I would ask my mother, ask my father, ask my grandparents why. And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. When we would go to town on a Saturday afternoon to the theater, all of us little black children had to go up to the balcony to watch a movie, and all of the little white children went downstairs. I saw those signs. I didn't like it, but I didn't know what to do about it. In 1955, 15 years old in the 10th grade, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on the old radio. The action of Rosa Parks, the words and leadership of Dr. King inspired me to find a way to get in the way. And that's exactly what I did. As a young child in 1956, at the age of 16, with some of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we went down to the public library, trying to get library cards, trying to check out some books. And we were told by the librarian that the library was for whites only and not for coloreds. I never went back to the Pike County Public Library until July 5th, 1998, for a book signing of my first book, Walking with the Wind. And hundreds of blacks and white citizens came. We had some refreshments, something to drink and something to eat. And I signed a lot of books. At the end of the book signing, the library gave me a library card. It says something about the distance we've come and the progress we've made. When I finished high school in May of 1957, at the age of 17, I had applied to attend a little college called Troy State College, only 10 miles from my home, now known as Troy University. And that school today is growing like Bermuda grass, just growing all over the place, becoming so big. They have campuses abroad, military bases, Fort Benning in Georgia, but all over the place. And I run into people all the time saying, I know you're from Troy. I got my degree from Troy University, but they've never been on the main campus in Troy, Alabama. So, submitting my application, my high school transcript, I never heard a word from the college. So I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't tell my mother, I didn't tell my father, any of my sisters or brothers. I just wrote this letter to Dr. King and said, I need your help. I want to attend Troy State. Dr. King wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, I had been accepted at a little college in Nashville, Tennessee, American Baptist College. And after being there for 2 or 3 weeks, I told one of my teachers that I'd been in contact with Dr. King, and this teacher knew Dr. King. They both had attended Morehouse College together in Atlanta. So he informed Dr. King that I was there in Nashville. Martin Luther King Jr. got back in church with me and suggested when I was home for spring break to come and see him. On a Saturday morning, I boarded a Greyhound bus from Troy to Montgomery. And a young lawyer by the name of Fred Gray, who's played in the movie Selma, who had been Rosa Parks' lawyer and Dr. King's lawyer, and the lawyer for the people involved in the Montgomery bus boycott, and became our lawyer during the Freedom Ride and during the march from Selma to Montgomery. Met me at the Greyhound bus station, drove me to the First Baptist Church in downtown Montgomery, pastored by the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, a colleague of Dr. King, and drove me to that church. I saw Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Ralph Abernathy in a little office, standing behind the desk. And Dr. King said, are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis? And I said, Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis. And he started calling me the boy from Troy. After the discussion with him and Reverend Ralph Abernathy, I took a bus back home to Troy. I sat at Troy on that farm. Had a discussion with my mother and my father, and I told them that Dr. King said if I pursued my interest in Troy State, our home could be bombed or burned. We could lose the land. My mother was so afraid. My father didn't say much. So I decided maybe it was best for me to continue to study in Nashville. And it was in the city of Nashville, the first city for me to live in, I literally grew up. It was there that we studied the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, studied the life of Gandhi. It was there that we started studying the work of Henry David Thoreau, studying civil disobedience. It was there that we studied what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the people in Montgomery were all about. It was there that we started studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. And many of us grew to accept it as a way of life, as a way of living. Being taught by a young man, a pacifist, by the name of Jim Lawson. Every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m., a small group of students from Vanderbilt University, Tennessee State University, Peabody College, American Baptist, Mahara Medical School, will come and study. And we started to accept the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living. And then we started talking about what we were going to do with this new teaching, this new way of thinking, and that we will use it to desegregate downtown Nashville and create what we call the beloved community. So a group of black and white college students and some high school students, we started sitting in at lunch counter. First we had tested in to establish the fact that the place would not serve African American or an integrated group. We would be sitting there in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion, waiting to be served. And someone would come up and spit on us, or put a lighted cigarette out in our hair, or down our backs, pour hot water, hot coffee on us, and we would look straight ahead. And then on one day, we heard that we would be arrested if we went down, and it was the week leading up to February the 27th, to Saturday, February the 27th, 1960. And when I would go down to protest, I always wanted to look what I call clean. Some of you might know what that means. I wanted a new suit. I couldn't afford it. So I went downtown Nashville, Tennessee, to a used men's store and found a suit my size, and I bought it. You know how much I paid for it? It was a Barton. Some of the men here, maybe a little older, young people would know what I'm talking about. It was a Barton 500. I paid $5 for it. This young man the other day, a few days ago, did some research, and he located a copy of the picture with me being arrested on the front page of the Nashville Tennessean. I paid $5 for it. I look good. And I tell you, I went to jail with a sense of pride and with a sense of dignity. And if I had that suit today, I told Andrew I probably would sell it on the eBay. The first time I got arrested, I felt free. I felt liberated. I felt like I had crossed over. So during the 60s, I was jailed, beaten, and arrested 40 times. And since I've been in Congress, I've been arrested 5 more times. And if I tell you, if we don't do something about comprehensive immigration reform, I'm probably going to get arrested again. March, book 2 is dramatic. I love the book. I love the cover. It is action. It is drama. And Dr. King used to say, when he would be speaking to us or teaching us, he would say, you got to dramatize the issue. Make it real. Make it plain. When I would attend his church in Atlanta and hear him preach, and his daddy, that we call Daddy King, would be nearby in the pulpit, he would always say, son, make it plain. Make it real. This book, March, book 2, is making it real. The first time I came to Washington, D.C., May 1st, 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, I'm much smaller, had all my hair, 21 years old, to go on something called the Freedom Ride. Just think in 1961, black people and white people couldn't board a Greyhound bus here in the nation's capital and travel together, be seated together, and travel through Virginia, through North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans, testing a decision of the United States Supreme Court. 13 of us. 7 African American and 6 white American. We had been trained. We were ready to go. We thought we would be beaten, maybe, arrested and jailed, but we were prepared to go. The night of May 3rd, 1961, as a group, we went to a Chinese restaurant here in Washington. I wish I can locate the place, maybe it's still there. Growing up in rural Alabama, going to school in Nashville, I never had Chinese food before. I'd never been to a Chinese restaurant before. I remember so well the dishes. The women were on the lazy Susan, you remember? You know? And turn the table around, and they had the nice silver dishes, covered dishes. Food was just wonderful. And someone said that night, you should eat well, because this may be like the Last Supper. The next morning, May 4th, the 13 of us, some boarded a trailway bus and others boarded a Greyhound bus to travel through the South. The first major incident occurred in a little town called Rock Hill, South Carolina, about 30 miles from Charlotte. My seatmate was a young white gentleman. The two of us got off the bus and tried to enter a so-called white waiting room. We were met by a group of men that were members of the Klan. They were young. They beat us and left us lying in a pool of blood. The local police officials came up, wanted to know whether we wanted to press charges. We said no. We come with love and peace. We believe in the philosophy of nonviolence. In May 2009, one of the men who had beaten me and my seatmate went before a reporter in the little town of Rock Hill, South Carolina, and told a story, and he said he wanted to locate the individuals that he had beaten. And the reporter told him, said, well, one of the guys is in Washington. He's serving in the Congress. This man's son had been encouraging his father to seek out the people. So in February 2009, this man and his son came to my office. And he said, Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the guys. I'm one of the men that beat you. I beat your seatmate. He said, I want to apologize. Will you forgive me? The son started crying. He started crying. And I said, I accept your apology. I forgive you. They hugged me. I hugged them back, and I started crying. It's the power of the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. It's the power of the way of peace, the way of love. And we tell the story in March, book 2. We tell other stories But on the Freedom Ride, I know some of you seen the film, The Freedom Ride. Almost 400 people were arrested that summer of 1961. Attempted to burn a bus in Anderson, Alabama, between Birmingham and Atlanta and Birmingham. A mob beat us at the Greyhound bus station in Montgomery. Not just us, when we got off the bus, they first beat members of the media, reporters, photographers, and the late John Singerthaler, who was there representing President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy as an aide, but hit in the head with a lead pipe and left lying on the streets of Montgomery. That was on a Saturday, May 20. On the night of May 21st, we were having a mass meeting in the same church where I first met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. A mob marched on the church and tried to burn the church down with people in it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went down into the basement of the church and made a call to Washington and spoke to the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy informed President Kennedy of what was happening. President Kennedy federalized the Alabama National Guard, placed the city of Montgomery under martial law. The marshals and the guards came in and took control of the meeting. And we stayed for the most part in that church. We tell the story of what happened during the Freedom Ride. We were arrested later and jailed in Jackson, Fielder City Jail, the county jail, and later transferred to the state penitentiary at Parchment. Now, white and black, men and women, were all arrested. But when we got to the jail, we were segregated. All of the white men from the black men, all of the white women from the black women. In Montgomery, in Jackson, it was against the law for black people and white people to stay in the same hotel. In Montgomery, it was against the law for black people and white people to ride in the same taxi cab. We had to change that. They transferred us to the state penitentiary at Parchment. But we stayed. We get there. The guy said, we make it plain, right, Andrew? I won't use the word. But the guard said, sing your GD songs now. You know what I mean? We have in here that will eat you, they will beat you. They line all of the men up in a line. And it's a strip. You have to take all your clothing off. You read the book. We make it plain. They urge you to go into a shower, to take a shower. And while you were showering, a gun was drawn on you. You have facial hair, mustache, a beard, no mirror, but you have to shave all of the hair off of your face. And later, after you take a shower, they give you a pair of Mississippi State Penitentiary shorts and an undershirt, what we kept on. And you can only take a shower once a week. They treated us like we were animals in a cage. But each one of us tried and did get out within 44 days to appeal our cases. But the Freedom Rides led to the segregation of public transportation all across the South. Those signs that said white waiting, white men, white women, colored women. By November the 1st, 1961, with the urging of President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, got the Interstate Commerce Commission to bring down those signs. Those signs are gone, and they will not return. And our children and their children, only places they will see those signs will be in a book, in a museum, or on a video. They're gone. So March tells the story not just for this generation, but for our children and for those yet unborn. The Freedom Ride, the sit-ins, the March on Washington, the march from Selma to Montgomery, all help to redeem the soul of America and move us closer to a more perfect union. That would be book, March, book 3. And it would tell the story of Selma. Right, Andrew?
Yes, sir.
We will make it plain and we will make it clear. I'm going on for a while. Let me present to you Andrew Aydin.
If we start walking around like this, we're really enjoying this. We went to Apple last week, and Tim Cook showed us how you do this, where you walk back and forth. All I can think is, please, God, don't let me fall off. It's never easy to follow Congressman Lewis. Anybody want to try it? I've spent the last 2 years on the road with him. We've gone to elementary schools in the poorest part of Arkansas to some of the world's biggest companies. But what I've found over and over again is that this nation needs to hear his story. We're at sort of one of those junctures, those crossroads as a society, as a people, where we're going to have to decide what sort of nation we're going to become. We've seen protests from Ferguson, Occupy Wall Street, to some that I don't think we fully know are happening right now. And I think it's just the beginning. One of the things that Congressman's taught me so much about is how the civil rights movement was an expression of a frustration long incubated. Whether it was A. Philip Randolph's first attempt at a march on Washington in 1941, or the first attempt of the Freedom Rides in 1947, known as a Journey of Reconciliation, in which the participants ended up spending 22 days in a Mississippi chain gang. There was a precursor. There was that moment before the Montgomery bus boycott, a moment before the Nashville sit-ins, and I think we're in that moment again. And what we're trying to do with March is that we're trying to show another generation how it was done, the principles, the fundamental tactics. So you might be asking yourself, why would you write a graphic novel? Why would John Lewis, of all people, Presidential Medal of Freedom winner, icon, congressman from the 5th District of Georgia, my congressman since I was 3 years old, why would he write a graphic novel? Well, let me tell you. It started in 2008. And I was serving as a congressman's campaign staff, serving as a press person. And it was kind of getting down to the end of the campaign. I would actually imagine some of y'all have worked on a campaign. Y'all have an understanding. It's not easy. You're spending 14, 16 hours a day. You're eating awful food because it's the only thing that can get to you. But you're doing it because you believe in the person taking an office so that they can do good on our behalf. And that's what we did for months. I mean, he won with like 80% of the vote. But that's the kind of person the congressman is. We don't take anything for granted. And so it was coming down to the end of that campaign. And we started talking about what we were going to do after. What is it that we're going to do to relax? It's not something you hear a lot around our office. And some people were, hey, you're going to go see their parents. They're going to go to the beach. And I said, well, I'm going to go to a comic book convention. How many of y'all been to a comic book convention? There you go. You got a few. Y'all can come out now. It's okay. A congressman did it. And as you can imagine, the folks in professional politics, they too laughed at me. It's called Dragon Con, if we're going to be specific. It's a big cosplay convention. It probably deserved it. But from the back of the room, I heard a deep voice, and it was John Lewis. And he was saying, don't laugh. There was a comic book during the Civil Rights Movement, and it was incredibly influential. That comic book was called Martin Luther King and the Montgomery Story. It sold for 10 cents. It was 16 pages cover to cover. And it helped inspire some of the earliest acts of civil disobedience of the Civil Rights Movement. It talked about the Montgomery bus boycott. It talked about Gandhi. It talked about the fundamental principles of nonviolence. Well, being the comic book nerd I am, I had that moment where I was like, why don't you write a comic book? I was 24 years old. I didn't know any better. It was a summer of hope and change. People were talking about, how do we reach young people, engage them in the political process, right? Politicians are all of a sudden wanting to know what this Facebook thing was. How do we tweet? What is that? Anything was possible. And the question was, how do we teach them about the Civil Rights Movement? And I just started answering, well, you should write a comic book. And after enough times of saying that, the congressman looked me dead in the eye and he said, okay, I'll do it, but only if you write it with me. And that moment right there changed my life. After the campaign, I went back to Washington. We started working, and I'll never forget the night, because it was just down the street. And we were coming along 2nd Street, right where you get to East Capitol. You look to the left, and you see the Capitol, and you look to the right, and it looks up to Lincoln Park. And the congressman was riding shotgun, and I looked over at him, and I asked him, I was like, Congressman, are you sure you really want to do this? Because I'm going to go talk to some publishers, if you're sure. And they might, this might turn into something. You never know. And he said, let's do it. Go. Congressman likes to tell people when they ask him, what should I do to get involved? And he says, just do it. Just go. Get involved. There's no formula. And that's what he told me to do. About 4.5 years later, March Book 1 debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. There was, I don't know if I do it justice. There was some moments where I crossed paths with individuals I had no right even knowing. On the congressman's pilgrimage, which he will lead again in a few days down to Alabama, I ended up on an elevator with Ethel Kennedy and John Siegenthaler. John Siegenthaler was a pillar of this institution and so many others. He was an aide to Robert Kennedy. He's a character in Book 2, and he was the publisher of the Nashville Tennessean. And obviously Ethel Kennedy was Robert Kennedy's widow. And I get into the elevator, and I look, and there they are. And there I am. And I didn't know any better again, and I said, well, excuse me. You might be interested to know that you're in a comic book that I'm working on with John Lewis. And Ethel looks up at me with those big, beautiful eyes, and she says very politely, well, that's nice, dear. So you can understand what it meant to me when she called me on my cell phone more than a year later to tell me that March Book 1 was the first graphic novel to ever receive the Robert F. Kennedy Book Award, which we accepted in this building, just upstairs. In fact, the first time we spoke here, it was a much smaller room, much fewer people came. So there's something happening here, and I'm really grateful for you guys being here. I'm really grateful to the museum as well. They've been a tremendous partner in helping us. Just great people. But, and this journey, those moments that where you sort of realize this isn't just a book. This isn't just a process of telling a story one more time. You see a lot of politicians put out books, and they talk about my vision for America, how I'm going to make change and make you rich too, whatever it may be. This wasn't that. Just before Book 1 came out, I got a phone call from a reporter at a conservative newspaper that shall remain nameless. And no, come on. Hey, you guys probably know who it is. Let's be real. And he said, look, I don't usually do this, but I gave your book to my 9-year-old son. And now he's gone, and he's put on his Sunday suit, and he's marching around my house, demanding equality for everyone. But that was just the beginning of these. I got a tweet during the Oscars from a young mother who said, I just had to chase my son back into his room because he'd snuck out to read March Book 2. He's 12 years old. Or another group of 12-year-olds that I heard about today in another tweet when a producer for one of the 24-hour news channels had walked into a Barnes & Noble in New York, and there was a gaggle of 3 12-year-old girls sitting in a circle reading together March Book 2. This generation can do so much. But we're failing them. You look at the Southern Poverty Law Center's report that they put out every other year, depending on the funding, which is never enough. And they look at civil rights education in this country. 47 states are failing to adequately teach the civil rights movement. And the last one, 19 states have no civil rights education standards whatsoever. But we're changing that. March is being taught in more than 40 states. This has happened in less than 2 years. It's being used in first-year reading programs at places like Michigan State, Marquette University, Georgia State, University of Illinois, and others. It's been translated into French, and we've got a few more coming. It's bringing a new generation into the fold. Part of what I do in the congressman's office is I tweet. I handle social media. I tweet for a living. Y'all laugh. That's serious business in this town. And what I'm constantly fascinated with, the question I try and pose to young people whenever I get the chance is this. What would Dr. King tweet? What would Gandhi post? How would they use this technology? Whether it's cell phones, wireless internet, the unbelievable technology to reach so many people at one time. Congressman will always tease me whenever I'm like, that tweet reached 125,000 people. He's like, technology, it's so amazing. And we often talk, what would have been possible during the civil rights movement if you had that technology? But this generation, they know how to use it better than any before them, better than any of us, even myself. They're born with it. They're digital natives. And if we can show them the principles of nonviolence, if we can show them how it is a tactic, how it is a tool, how it is a way of life, a way of living, and have them apply it to the technology of today and the technology of tomorrow, the potential for them to organize and remake this world is limitless. Where do I think they should start? We've seen Occupy Wall Street. We've seen Black Lives Matter. We've seen 1 million hoodies. Where do I think they should start? Student loans. We are raising a generation of indentured servants. They're being born into another form of bondage. When we put this kind of debt on children who already have too many obstacles, we are not only restricting their ability to grow and raise family, we are restricting their ability to be creative, to innovate, to bring a new economy to us. Let me put it in a different way. When John Lewis got married, it was December 1968. And the headline in the LA Times in the wedding announcement read, Lillian Miles, to wed, unemployed political activist, John Lewis. People who are ahead of their time pay a price. And we need to save this generation from that burden so that they are free to pay the price for us. I'll tell you one more story. When I was a kid, I had a teacher who told me that comic books weren't real books. Well, a couple months ago, I had the opportunity to go back to my high school and have a lovely conversation with that same teacher as she taught my book. I say that not as any form of comeuppance to the teacher. I say it as an example of the short time span in which change is possible. I'm 31. I graduated a little while ago. And yet, in that period of time, with the assistance of someone who lived a story worth telling in this way, we were able to change that small piece to bring a legitimacy to a medium that had been so desperately needing it, that deserved it, but sometimes needs an extra push. Another way for me, another way that I look at March was my way, our way, because Nate Powell was watching. And Nate Powell is the unbelievable artist behind March. Really, he deserves this. Nate would be here, but his wife, Rachel, the unofficial member of Team March, is due any day now. So he is home tending to his pregnant wife and his firstborn child, Harper, and I wish he could be here. But the way I look at March, the way I see it, it was a gift that I and Nate could give to a man who's given his country so much. So thank you guys for having us. Thank you guys for reading. And thank you for being so kind. No.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Congressman Lewis. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We all hope you will now join us in the New York Times Sulzberger Great Hall of News. In our main atrium, you can exit in the back there where you can purchase a copy of March Book 2. The Congressman and Andrew will be signing copies of the book. Thank you again for joining us tonight.